Number 12. The CSS Alabama Artifacts. In 1984, a French vessel sweeping for mines in the English Channel discovered the wreckage of something incredible underwater. It was a ship built near the Liverpool harbor back in 1862 in secret, named the CSS Alabama. The ship was crafted for the Confederate States of America and spent the next almost 2 years raiding shipping routes throughout the Atlantic and all the way to the Caribbean. But it met its downfall in 1864 when it tried to battle the Union warship Kearsarge in the English Channel. The battle lasted about an hour and the CSS Alabama was sunk, lost under the waves until 120 years later. When the wreckage was discovered in 1984, it was pretty exciting for everybody. Excavations went on from between 1989 to the year 2002, with over 500 fascinating artifacts being rescued. There were some pretty boring artifacts recovered, such as toilets, dishes, and ordinary things from daily life. But there were also some cannons brought to the surface that were very nice. The CSS Alabama had 8 cannons, with the biggest being a Blakely 7-inch 100-pound rifled cannon. Number 11. Mysterious underwater fairy rings. Strange rings have been spotted underwater, and the bizarre sight of them has sparked all kinds of bizarre conspiracy theories, from aliens to fairies. The striking rings are up to 49 feet wide, located off the coast of Denmark. They were first captured in photographs taken by tourists in 2008, then again in 2011. They basically look like crop circles underneath the water. At the time, nobody could figure out just what in the world these mysterious underwater rings were. But now it seems the mystery has been solved. They're not leftover explosions from World War II, and they weren't left over by alien spaceships. Instead, they're simply rings of green eelgrass. According to biologists from the University of Southern Denmark, the rings of eelgrass are formed because of toxins that build up in the mud on the seabed. When eelgrass grows, it does so outwards in a circle. When the eelgrass meets the toxic mud, it stops growing, creating what looks like fairy circles under the water. Number 10. The sunken city of Atlit Yam. Underwater archaeologists in Israel discovered a Neolithic fishing village that was flooded 9,000 years ago when the water level began to rise. The amazing site is about 1,200 feet offshore in the Bay of Atlit, only about 30 feet below the surface of the water. It's actually one of the best preserved underwater prehistoric settlements in the world. It was first discovered in the 1980s, with excavations going on between 1985 and 2000. This is the sunken settlement of Atlit Yam. But it's not just a prehistoric village. The site also contains a giant megalith in its center, built of 7 huge stones arranged in a semicircle around an ancient wellspring. All kinds of amazing things have been found here, from pieces of pottery to the remains of roughly 100 different plants that had been cultivated by the ancient people. Archaeologists also found the bones of domestic animals, suggesting sophisticated architecture was going on here a very long time ago. And yes, archaeologists discovered human remains. There weren't many, but there were enough to paint a pretty vivid picture of the people who lived here. One of the most fascinating things about the population of Atlit Yam is that many of them lived to be over 50 years old. Even just 200 years ago, that was like living to be 100 today. Number 9. The Megalodon. A video has surfaced that some claim is proof that the extinct Megalodon is actually still alive and swimming through the world's oceans. The video was captured somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, taken from on board a sailing ship. The ship and its passengers had been sailing through the Atlantic for about 6 weeks when a giant shark, seemingly 20 feet in length or more, appeared in the crystal blue waters for just a few seconds, before once more vanishing into the deep. This is extraordinary because on average, the great white shark only grows to be around 15 feet, and this one was clearly much larger. Could it have been a baby megalodon? The answer is maybe. The megalodon has been extinct for about 3.6 million years, but hey, maybe somewhere one survived and evaded detection, and this huge unidentified shark is its offspring. Number 8. Hot air balloon jelly. Deep underwater in a submerged canyon off the coast of Puerto Rico, a marine blob has been discovered. What exactly is this strange marine blob? Well, it looks like an underwater hot air balloon. It has a completely translucent body shaped like a balloon with 2 string-like tentacles trailing behind it. The creature is also incredibly vibrant. When any light hits it, it refracts the light and shines with a prism of rainbow color. The blob was discovered by researchers with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They found a small party of them for the first time in 2015 at a depth of 13,000 feet. But it wasn't until just recently that the team identified the unknown blobs as a new species of tiny invertebrate predators known as sea walnuts or comb jellies. Scientifically, they're known as stenophores. It's not that unusual for scientists to discover some kind of new blob in the ocean. What was really amazing about this discovery was that scientists did it all strictly from pictures. Because the blob was so deep in the ocean and they only saw it with remotely operated vehicles, they weren't actually able to get a physical specimen. But still, they did their homework and identified a new species of living underwater balloon. Number 7. Sunken UFO. Thanks to Google Maps, internet sleuth and online UFO investigator Scott Waring may have discovered proof of a fleet of alien spacecraft resting on the bottom of the sea. Where is this mysterious fleet of aliens hiding? Apparently just off the coast of Greece. And these aren't any ordinary spaceships either. They are massive. Scott estimated the smallest ship to be around 262 feet across. That's about the size of an American football field. Scott was even able to determine roughly when the UFOs arrived off the Greek coast by going back and looking through old satellite pictures from the area. The first UFO made its appearance back in 2016, with more coming later. However, nobody knows why the ships are there or if they're even real. Some say Scott is looking at totally ordinary shapes underwater and turning them into UFOs. After all, the UFOs Scott claims belong to aliens really just look like circular formations off the coast. Until we see some legit flying saucers and little green men, this one might be a wash. Number 6. World War II silver. In November 1942, the SS City of Cairo was sunk by a German U-boat. The ship carried almost 300 passengers, but besides that, it was also carrying 100 tons of silver. It sunk 16,800 feet below the water, where it was lost until 2011, when Deep Ocean Search decided to go look for the lost gold. Why didn't anyone look for it before? How had nobody found it yet? I mean, that's quite a bit of treasure. Back in 1942, the SS City of Cairo embarked on a journey from India to deliver silver rupees to England as part of the war effort. It only took 2 torpedoes to win the life of over 100 people. "Good night, sorry for sinking you," the captain told the ship as he and most of the others escaped on the lifeboats. Although the ship was discovered in 2011, mysteriously, the British government kept it a secret until 2015. By then, the silver was all melted into coins and sold. The amount of silver found was worth about $50 million. But what's really astounding is the record set by the sunken ship. For the SS City of Cairo is the largest and deepest recovery of precious metal from a shipwreck in maritime history. Number 5. Rare deep-sea fish. Floating in the water near Port Angeles, a paddleboarder made a very strange discovery. He found a fish from the deep with an eyeball so big it looked like a dinner plate. The paddleboarder wasn't sure just what he'd come across, though he knew it was special. Luckily, officials with the Harbor Wild Watch happened to be in the area at the time and were able to investigate the strange creature. They identified it as a ribbonfish, also called the king of salmon. It's almost never seen in the wild, making it very rare that one was found literally floating around near the shore. They usually live 3,000 feet deep along the Pacific coastline between Washington and British Columbia. This particular specimen was just shy of 5 feet, and experts believe it probably got caught in the surf and washed inland where it was discovered. Here's a bit of background on the king of salmon. The local Makah tribe spoke of the fish in legend, saying that each year it was the king of salmon that led the normal salmon back to their spawning grounds. Eating or catching this fish was forbidden in the old days. They feared that if man killed the king of salmon, all the salmon would vanish. Number 4. The Uluburun Shipwreck. Off the coast of Turkey, archaeologists have been investigating the Uluburun shipwreck for years. The ship was crafted by the ancient Phoenician civilization and destroyed sometime around 1330 BC. It was on its way from Lycia to Greece with a cargo full of trading goods when it sank over 3,000 years ago. It sat on the bottom of the sea undiscovered until 1984, when marine archaeologists began taking artifacts and treasures out from the sunken vessel. So far, they've rescued 17 tons of artifacts. This has given researchers a vast wealth of knowledge regarding interactions across the Mediterranean Sea during the Bronze Age. The ship was only about 150 feet beneath the surface, meaning it was relatively easy for divers to get every last piece of the shipwreck out. It did take about 22,400 dives, but they managed to do it. Some of the most impressive items included 348 copper ingots crafted from pure copper in Cyprus. This wasn't a battle vessel filled with war relics, it was a real trading ship. Archaeologists also found 120 ingots of pure tin and 150 jars filled with terebinth resin from Israel that would have been used in building projects. Number 3. Unknown Colossus. Using a remotely operated vehicle, a deep-sea diver made a rather horrifying discovery. it was almost 3,000 feet beneath sea level when he stumbled upon what looked to be the bones of a giant. This wasn't a professional dive by any official organization. It was more like the deep sea equivalent to a guy with a metal detector, seeing as remotely operated vehicles are getting more affordable for amateur treasure hunters to get a hold of. Because of this, the discovery does need to be taken with a grain of salt. That said, it does look legit. The diver uploaded the video footage he took using the vehicle online, showing what is unmistakably the spinal column of an animal probably more than 90 feet long. Some have speculated it could be the bones of a dead blue whale or an oarfish, while others say it could be the leftover remains of an undiscovered sea dragon or even a recently deceased dinosaur. Unfortunately, the diver was unable to retrieve any pieces of the skeleton and bring them to the surface, so we actually have no way of knowing what kind of monster we're dealing with. Number 2. Yonaguni Monument. This strange structure can be found near the island of Yonaguni, Japan. In 1987, Kihachiro Arataki, a director of the Yonaguni-cho Tourism Association, was out looking for sharks when he noticed singular seabed formations resembling architectonic structures. Soon after, a group of scientists looked into the case. Although popular with locals and tourists, it wasn't until 10 years later that Japanese industrialist Yasuo Watanabe sponsored an expedition for Discovery Channel. They claim to have found artifacts such as bowls and tools left behind by an old civilization. The monument is made up of very fine sandstones and mudstones of the lower Miocene Yeyama group. There's no telling how old this could be, but it's believed to be from ancient times. They're not freestanding but connected to underlying rocks. Although there are 2 space pillars at almost 8 feet tall, a 16-foot wide ledge surrounding the base on 3 sides, a 24-foot column, a 33-foot wall, a star, and a turtle-shaped platform and other structures, the main feature is a rectangular formation that's 490 by 130 feet wide and 90 feet tall. The top is only 16 feet below sea level. There's an ongoing argument as to whether these monuments are man-made monoliths or a natural occurrence. Although locals may disagree, neither the government nor Japan's Agency of Cultural Affairs will recognize the site as important and therefore will not carry out research or preservation measures. The significance of this site remains unexplained. Number 1. Wreck of the Tayo. Off the coast of the Solomon Islands in a beautiful underwater location called the Nono Lagoon, there's a mysterious fishing vessel parked at a 90-degree angle. This is the wreckage of the Tayo tuna ship, which ran aground after hitting the coral reef. During an attempted rescue of the fishing ship, it slipped over the edge of the reef and landed vertically with its nose pointing to the surface. Now, it's one of the most picturesque wrecks anywhere in the world. It's home to a host of interesting fish and other marine life, and it's a popular spot for anyone who likes to do a bit of adventure diving. Other than simply being one of the coolest and most intriguing diving locations in the world, nothing all that mysterious has been discovered here. It's just a cool place you've never heard of before. Number 10. Bylong Elevator. At 1,070 feet, 326 meters tall, the controversial Bylong 100 Dragons Elevator in Hunan, China is the world's tallest outdoor lift. Located in the Zhangjiajie National Forest, this impressive engineering feat was built into a quartz sandstone cliff face starting in 1999, and it opened to the public in 2002. It consists of 3 glass-faced double-deck elevators that run parallel to one another, traveling inside the mountain's walls for the lower 505 feet, 154 meters of the journey. The upper 565 feet, 172 meters, offers fascinating views of the surrounding forest and mountains. The elevator cars hold up to 50 passengers each and make the steep ascent in just 1 minute and 32 seconds, thanks to a 2015 upgrade. In addition to being the world's tallest outdoor lift, the Bylong Elevator is the world's tallest double-deck sightseeing elevator and the world's fastest passenger traffic elevator with the biggest carrying capacity, according to Atlas Obscura. But it hasn't been without its fair share of controversies. The Bylong Elevator is in an earthquake-prone region, and for a 10-month period between 2002 and 2003, it was shut down to address safety concerns. It's also in a protected park and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which stirred debate about whether or not it was ethical to implement a massive steel structure. Environmentalists argued that the elevator attracts tourists to an already overburdened natural site, while those who disagreed claimed that the lift reduces wear and tear on footpaths and roads that visitors were previously required to use to access the site. Would you ride in this elevator? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 9. Giant's Causeway. Along Ireland's northern coast in County Antrim, there are around 40,000 polygonal interlocking basalt columns, which make up what's known as the Giant's Causeway. This seemingly otherworldly site was created between 50 and 60 million years ago during the Paleocene epoch, when a massive volcanic eruption spewed molten basalt and formed a plateau. As it cooled, the lava contracted and cracked similarly to drying mud, forming the geometric-looking pillars that stand there today. According to Gaelic mythology, the columns are a causeway built by an Irish giant named Fionn mac Cumhail, Finn McCool, who constructed the site across the North Channel to respond to a fight challenge from Scottish giant Benandonner. Fionn realized that his adversary was much larger than him and fled back over the causeway to his wife, who disguised him as a baby. When Benandonner saw Fionn dressed as an infant, he believed it was Fionn's child and could only imagine how huge Fionn must be. Benandonner turned and ran across the causeway back to Scotland, destroying much of it along the way so that Fionn could not chase him. Whether you consider the Giant's Causeway to be a geological oddity or the scene of a mythical battle, or if you want to see it firsthand before deciding for yourself, it's open to the public and guided tours are available. Number 8. Glass Beach. The southern beach of McCarricher State Park in Fort Bragg, California is filled with a mix of pebbles and soft, colorful pieces of glass. Nicknamed Glass Beach, it's one of 3 sites in the area that were used as trash dumps between 1906 and 1967. When the dumping activities stopped, years' worth of all sorts of garbage was piled at the edge of the sea, including electronics, cans, bottles, and other items. A major cleanup effort was undertaken in 1988, and in 2002, the Glass Beach was incorporated into McCarricher State Park. Over time, the remaining glass and pottery fragments became weathered and polished, leaving behind a colorful array of decorative-looking stones. Tens of thousands of people visit the site every year. To help maintain the beach's unique look, park staff deter visitors from taking souvenirs. But many, if not most people, take some sea glass with them. And it seems only inevitable that eventually, Glass Beach will be just ordinary beach. It already looks much less colorful than it used to, and so far campaigns to replenish the sea glass have been unsuccessful. Have you ever been here before? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to American Eye for more videos like these. Number 7. Thors Well. Nicknamed the drain pipe of the Pacific, Thors Well is a natural gaping sinkhole in Yakuts, Oregon that seems to be draining the sea and which never seems to fill. Located along the west coast near Cape Perpetua, experts believe that it likely began as a sea cave carved out by waves on the basalt shoreline. Eventually, the roof collapsed, creating openings at the top and bottom. The hole measures an estimated 20 feet, 6 meters deep, but this natural wonder is not as bottomless as it appears. It is dangerous, however, as Atlas Obscura points out. But not that dangerous, according to Siuslaw National Forest Field Ranger Vicki Penwell, who told Oregon Live in 2016 that 3 people had been hit by unexpected waves so far that year, with no serious injuries incurred. The best views of Thors Well are at high tide and during storms, when visitors can see the water funneling down at full force. There are several other fascinating similar features nearby, including a spouting horn called Cook's Chasm and Devil's Churn, a narrow Pacific Ocean inlet that displays dramatic waves crashing and water churning. Number 6. Georgia's Guidestones. Nicknamed the American Stonehenge, the Georgia Guidestones are a series of 6 granite tablets arranged in the shape of a star. Located at the highest point in Elbert County, Georgia, USA, they are engraved with a collection of rules that their anonymous commissioner believes mankind needs to follow in order to restore humanity in the aftermath of the apocalypse. A short message graces the top of the monument in 4 ancient languages: Greek, Babylonian cuneiform, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The rules themselves are written in 8 languages, including English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. Included among the 10 guidelines are rules such as balance personal rights with social duties, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason, and be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature. So what's the story behind the Georgia Guidestones? In 1979, a man wishing to conceal his identity hired a local granite finishing company to build a monument containing instructions for the reestablishment of society. Per the terms of a legal agreement, all the structure's plans were to be destroyed upon its completion. The strange man, who went by the pseudonym R.C. Christian, and who seemingly had limitless money for the project, insisted on all information regarding his identity be strictly withheld from the public. Conspiracy theories about who he was abound, including rumors of the New World Order or Satanists being behind the guidelines. These far-fetched ideas have led to extreme vandalism, but have not brought anyone closer to identifying the monument's commissioner or commissioners. To date, all that is known about the anonymous sponsor or sponsors is that they are, according to a statement on the monument itself, a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. Number 5. Lake Hillier. Located on Middle Island off the western Australian coast, Lake Hillier is a bright pink saltwater lake that was first discovered in 1802 by cartographer and navigator Matthew Flinders. To this day, scientists don't know what causes Lake Hillier's vivid hue. Most experts believe that it has something to do with the presence of Dunaliella salina microalgae, which produce the carotenoid beta-caroene, a pigment commonly found in carrots. These photosynthetic organisms are highly salt-tolerant and generate energy using the light spectrum, minus red and orange frequencies. The water's distinctively fuchsia shade may also result from a reaction between salt and sodium bicarbonate. Another possible explanation stems from the halophilic bacteria found in its salt crusts. Whatever the reason, Lake Hillier's hypersaline water is safe for humans to swim in, but it's a protected nature reserve and visitors are only permitted under special circumstances. Anyway, the best views are from above by helicopter, which allows spectators to see the pink lake contrasting against the blue ocean next to it. Number 4. Ggantija. Located on the Maltesian island of Gozo, Ggantija is a megalithic temple complex made from enormous stones, some which exceed 16 feet and weigh more than 50 tons, 45.4 metric tons. Older than the Egyptian pyramids, the two temples that make up the site were erected at least 5,500 years ago, or around 3600 BC, during the Neolithic Age, before the advent of the wheel or metal stone cutting tools. They're among the world's oldest religious man-made structures, second only to Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey. Ggantija fell into disuse around 2500 BC and was reclaimed by nature. The site wasn't fully uncovered again until the 19th century. One of the reasons the buildings have survived so long is because the outer walls are made of a hard coralline limestone. Inner furnishings such as doorways, decorative slabs, and altars were constructed using a softer and smoother type of limestone. The name Ggantija translates to Giantess's Tower. According to local legend, a giantess named Sausuna constructed the semicircular structures by carrying the enormous stones to the site on her head. It makes sense that later generations assumed that no amount of humans could have moved the massive boulders on their own, but archaeologists and scholars, of course, do not accept this explanation. The discovery of small stone spheres at the site, which may have been used as ball bearings for moving the giant stones, provides one clue for explaining how mortals could have, in fact, built the temples on their own. Researchers believe that Ggantija served as a ceremonial site for fertility rituals, which likely involved animal sacrifices. A large terrace at the front of the temples, as well as animal bones and the presence of stone hearths, lend credibility to this theory. Number 3. Badab Esert. Over the course of thousands of years, a series of travertine terraces known as Badab Esert developed in what is now northern Iran's Mazandaran province. Travertine is a type of limestone formed from the deposits in flowing water. In the case of Badab Esert, as the carbonated water from two mineral hot springs cooled, it deposited carbonate minerals in the mountainside. Originally formed during the Pleistocene and Pliocene epochs, the terraces have an unusual reddish color, owing to one of the springs' high iron oxide content. Located at 6,040 feet, 1,840 meters above sea level, each of the two springs has different natural characteristics. The water in the first spring has an unusually high salt content, as well as alleged medicinal properties that help to cure rheumatism and a host of other skin ailments. The second spring is sour to the taste and orange in color and is the one with a high iron oxide content. As a result, the terraced pools boast an array of red, orange, and yellow pools that take the form of a natural staircase of sorts. Regardless of the mechanisms behind what formed Badab Esert, it's certainly a breathtaking sight. Number 2. Chocolate Hills. In the Bohol province in the Philippines, there's a series of 1,260 or more hills known as the Chocolate Hills, spread over an area of 20 square miles, 50 kilometers squared. Normally covered in green grass, they're named for the brown shade that the grass turns during the dry season, turning them into seemingly endless rows of Hershey's Kisses. These conical, symmetrical hills are made from limestone. Most of them measure between 98 and 164 feet, 30 to 50 meters high, with the tallest measuring 390 feet, 120 meters high. Bohol's hills are dispersed by the hundreds throughout the towns of Carmen, Batuan, and Sagbayan. Legend has it that two feuding giants brought the hills into existence by hurling rocks and boulders at one another. Their back and forth culminated into the mess of peaks known today as Chocolate Hills. A conflicting story claims that the hills were formed from a crying giant's tears. Scientists, on the other hand, believe that limestone erosion and tectonic processes created the Chocolate Hills. Those who want to experience the site in person should visit during the dry season between November and May. Number 1. Salar de Uyuni. One of the most extreme environments on Earth can be found across a 4,050 square mile, 10,490 kilometer square stretch of the Altiplano, or Andean Plateau, in modern-day Bolivia. Known as the Salar de Uyuni, or Bolivian Salt Flats, it's the world's largest salt flat. It sits at 11,995 feet, 3,656 meters above sea level. Between 30,000 and 42,000 years ago, the salt flats were part of a giant prehistoric lake called Lake Minchin. Ultimately, two modern lakes, Pupo and Uru Uru, were left behind, as well as two salt deserts known as Salar de Coipasa and the larger Salar de Uyuni. The site is perhaps best known for the stunning mirror-like effect that's produced during certain times of year when a thin layer of water from nearby lakes overflows onto the flats. This fascinating scenery not only attracts tourists, but is a lucrative extraction site for salt and lithium, which is used for powering laptops, smartphones, and electric cars, according to National Geographic. Nights are cold year-round, usually ranging between 15 and 41 degrees Fahrenheit, -9 to 5 Celsius, while daytime temperatures average between 55 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 to 20 degrees Celsius. Salar de Uyuni is home to the world's first salt hotel, Palacio de Sal, which first opened in 1995. It was located in the middle of the salt flat, but was closed down in 2002 due to environmental pollution resulting from mismanagement. Today, there are a handful of salt hotels, including one in the town of Uyuni and two that are out on the salt flats. The structures themselves and almost everything within them are carved from salt. Because the rain wears them down over time, the hotels have to be rebuilt every 10 to 15 years. In addition to the natural splendor of Salar de Uyuni and its boutique hotels, there's a train graveyard filled with old trains that once carried salt to Pacific ports. Number 10. Operation Wrath of God. In 1970, a man named Michael Harari was appointed head of a special unit within Israel's intelligence service that specialized in assassinations. He was a very high-ranking officer who's been referred to as the Zionist James Bond. In 1972, when Palestinian militants murdered 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympic Games, this was the man charged with tracking down each terrorist and killing them. It was known as Operation Wrath of God, and it was a straight-up murder and revenge plot. The assassination team consisted of 15 agents separated into 5 squads. There were assassins, logistic experts, agents who specialized in tracking and following targets, and a specialist in communications. Within just 9 months, Michael's special team had killed 6 of the terrorists. Not only that, but they had tracked them through Rome, Paris, Cyprus, and Athens. These people were literally assassinating victims on foreign soil, just like you see in the James Bond movies. If you think these shadow organizations don't exist, you're dreaming. This is a real thing that actually happened. And to be honest, the only reason we know about it today is because of a mistake that was made. The big issue came in 1973 when the team was in Norway and thought they had identified a key figure in the Olympic killings. They thought it was a person living and working as an ordinary waiter. They killed him and found out he had nothing to do with any of it. The Norwegian police arrested most of the team, but Michael Harari fled back to Israel without being caught. It soon came out what was going on, and there was international outrage. The operation was canceled. That is until 1979, when it was put back on and more people linked to the Munich murders were killed. Number 9. The mustard gas program. In 1943, during the height of World War II, somebody carved their name into the rock outside the Glenbrook Railway Tunnel in Australia under strange circumstances. 80 years later, his name is still there, serving as a horrifying reminder of a secret military operation in Australia involving deadly mustard gas. The currently unused railway tunnel was once one of 14 storage facilities in Australia used to hold poisonous mustard gas during the Second World War, even though it was banned worldwide after World War I because of its devastating effects. It was one of the reasons that the Geneva Protocol in 1925 prohibited using chemical warfare. But of course, there are no real rules when it comes to war. Australia was worried about Japan during World War II, especially after the Japanese invaded Singapore. With reports that they were using chemical warfare against the Chinese, the Australians needed to be prepared. So they stored huge amounts of mustard gas all around the country, just in case. It was a secret chemical warfare program that didn't come to light until much later, when some of the people involved in the project eventually disclosed what happened, though it wasn't until the contract expired. What contract is that, you ask? It was the one bounding them to secrecy for 50 years under the threat of criminal prosecution. Then in the 1990s, they were finally able to admit the dangerous secret. Number 8. Project Iceworm. Project Iceworm was one of those bizarre military operations that's almost too hard to believe. The project started after World War II when the US and Russia were stuck in the icy Cold War. Speaking of icy, the United States wanted a place to hide a small collection of nuclear missiles in case they needed to drop them on the Soviets. So the US created a base in Greenland to store nukes. Their proposed facility was to have a secret network of ice tunnels with missile silos built into them, all connected by rail cars. The project was disguised as an Arctic research center so as not to arouse suspicion. The site of the project was chosen, technicians and engineers were sent to Greenland, many tunnels were dug into the snow, an underground city was built, and a small town to house 200 soldiers was erected. But the site never really turned out to be much use and was abandoned in the mid-1960s. It wasn't even known to the public until 1997 when the Danish parliament revealed the project. That was the only reason the public found out about it. Then, when the Greenland ice sheet began melting much quicker than anticipated in the 2016s, scientists started to worry that the radioactive material still stuck in the ice in Greenland could leak into the ocean. As far as anyone knows, the problem of nuclear contamination has yet to be fixed. Number 7. The Hungarian Killer. Bela Kiss is one of the most horrific killers to ever come out of Hungary. He was also a soldier in World War I that has been the source of significant mystery. In 1914, he was 37 years old and running a successful tinsmith business. Then he was conscripted to fight in the war. In 1916, Kiss's landlord heard that he had been captured and was probably dead in Serbia. So they began preparing the house to be rented to someone else. At this point, the landlord began to get a little suspicious. There were strange metal drums inside the house. The landlord thought maybe they were used for storing oil, but the lids were soldered shut. It wasn't until the landlord punctured one of the lids and opened the drum that they realized something horrifying was going on. The drums were full of rotting human flesh. The landlord informed the police in Budapest. All the drums were opened and the bodies of young women were found, most of them strangled with rope and stuffed into the barrels naked. In the end, there were 30 dead women on the property. Bela Kiss was a serial killer. The army was notified and Kiss was detained in the hospital in Serbia. But he escaped, vanished, and was never seen again. Some believe he escaped to New York City. There were investigations to try and find the guy all the way until 1936, with rumors that Kiss was working as a janitor. However, he's never been found and is definitely dead by now. Number 6. The My Lai Massacre. The most unspeakable and horrific military operation in the history of the United States of America was during the Vietnam War. It's known as the My Lai Massacre, and it should honestly be considered a war crime. American soldiers entered the village of My Lai on March 16, 1968. There, they slaughtered and mutilated 500 people, also assaulting women and young children. And as if that weren't enough to be outraged about, the incident was covered up for a full year before the American press finally got hold of the story. It was actually the brutality of the military operation in My Lai that led a huge explosion of anti-war sentiment in the United States. After all, what's the point in fighting against communism if the people who are doing the fighting slaughter women and children indiscriminately and do heinous, unspeakable things to their bodies? But why did this senseless attack occur? Charlie Company, part of the 11th Infantry Brigade, got news that there were enemies in control of the village, so they were sent there on a mission of search and destroy. The orders came from Army commanders. What were these orders? The soldiers were told that every single living person in the area should be considered Viet Cong or a Viet Cong sympathizer. They were to destroy the village and every last person in it. When they arrived, they found nothing but women and children. Nonetheless, they were ordered to kill them all. According to History.com, not a single shot was fired at Charlie Company throughout the slaughter. Does hearing this story make you less supportive of the military? It's clearly a horrific incident, but was it just a tragic mistake on the orders of the commanders? Tell me what you think down in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to American Eye if you haven't already for more intense videos just like this one. Number 5. Kitten Spies. There were all kinds of strange operations being done by the CIA in the 60s and 70s. One of the strangest by far was when they experimented on cats. It turned out to be a pretty strange operation. After all, cats don't typically do what they're told. Still, the CIA thought that if trained properly, cats could become spies. The idea was that a cat could be wired to record conversations and it would never be busted because nobody ever thought a cat would be a spy. It didn't make sense, which is why it made so much sense to the CIA. It was known as Operation Acoustic Kitty, and it was a total failure. According to former assistant to the CIA director Victor Marchetti, the idea was to slit the cat open, stuff batteries into it, sew it back up, turn it into a living listening device, then let it go into Soviet territory to be a secret agent. Instead, Victor claims the operators made a monstrosity. It cost about $20 million, and in the end, the only thing that the CIA learned was that they couldn't train cats. Number 4. The Zone of Silence. In Mexico, just over a mile from San Ignacio, there's a place known as the Silent Zone, or locally, Zona de Silencio. This place has been compared to the Bermuda Triangle. Legends say that radio waves are unable to be transmitted in the silent zone because of either aliens or some kind of unexplainable Earth energy. But the truth of why the silent zone is so silent is quite a bit stranger. There was a secret military operation in July of 1970 in which a rocket lost control, fell into Mexican airspace, and landed in the desert of Durango, very far from its intended destination. The rocket had a payload of cobalt-57, an extremely radioactive element. The rocket was eventually found and retrieved, as was the contaminated soil. But locals apparently enjoyed the attention because they perpetuated the rumors and myths until they had created a legend that to this very day brings curious tourists out to the silent zone in hopes of seeing aliens. There aren't any aliens, but there are the remains of a mysterious military operation gone wrong. Number 3. The Pentagon's Secret Army. The largest undercover military force in the entire world has been created by the Pentagon, and it all happened in the last 10 years or so. According to Newsweek, there are at least 60,000 people who are part of the Pentagon's Secret Army, with the majority of them working ordinary jobs with secret identities. Apparently, these secret soldiers carry out assignments both at home and internationally under civilian cover. Sometimes they hide in private businesses, some of them work in big companies, all of them are secret. A lot of them also operate in cyber warfare. The exclusive report from Newsweek was based on a long investigation spanning 2 years and looking through hundreds and even thousands of job postings and resumes. This is a vast network, a clandestine force whose members participate in everything from manufacturing to the falsification of documents. It's not exactly clear how many people participate in the secret and mysterious operations or what the end game is, but as it turns out, anyone could be a part of this hidden force, even your neighbor. Do you know anyone who you think might be a part of this hidden arm of the military? It could be someone you least expect. Number 2. Secret Laos War. From 1964 to 1973, there was a secret military operation being carried out in Laos. Laos has actually been bombed by the United States more than any other country in the world. This tiny landlocked nation was the scene of a covert attempt by the CIA to take power away from the Communist Party at the time, Pathet Lao. The group was allied with both the North Vietnamese and the Soviet Union. Even though the country was officially neutral, it was a fierce battleground during the Cold War, with American bombers dropping an estimated 2 million tons of cluster bombs. That's more than every bomb dropped in World War II by either side combined. Laos shared a border with China and Vietnam. It was a key location for keeping communism away from the rest of Southeast Asia. The bombing campaign centered on the Ho Chi Minh Trail into Vietnam. Because there was no way for the US to initiate a ground war, after all, they didn't even win the Vietnam War using ground forces, all they could do was drop as many bombs as possible to cut off communist supplies running into Vietnam, while at the same time disrupt whatever was going on in Laos. The US sent bombers from covert mission bases in Thailand. At the peak of the bombings, they were sending an entire plane load of explosives every 8 minutes, 24 hours every day for a full 9 years before they eventually stopped. Needless to say, pretty horrific. Number 1. Daniel Boone. The USS Daniel Boone was one of the first fully functioning submarines that could launch deadly ballistic missiles. It employed the use of a cold launch system which ejected missiles from the launch tube without using the engines of the missiles. The engines would only kick in after the missile had cleared the water, which made the submarine one of the deadliest in the world. It operated from between 1962 and 1994, going on many missions, not all of them likely known to us. But what's even more interesting than this deadly naval vessel is that it was the first of its kind to be named in honor of Daniel Boone. Who was Daniel Boone? He was born in 1734 in Pennsylvania. He was the first of the British colonists to try and build a permanent settlement in Kentucky, but was chased away in 1773 by angry Native Americans. The Native Americans even kidnapped and murdered Boone's son, forcing him and the other explorers to return to North Carolina. However, he went back 2 years later in 1775 and blazed a trail from Virginia to central Kentucky, building a path that would facilitate the first permanent colonial settlements anywhere in Kentucky. Boone went on to live a long life, dying in September of 1820, and now there's a deadly submarine to commemorate his life. How do you feel about all these secret operations? And what kind of operations do you think are happening right now? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe and come back for more amazing videos right here on American Eye.